I'll be right back. I'm going to sit here.
All right.
And again, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening to Barbara Sue, but good afternoon to everybody else. And I think we are now on YouTube as well.
It says live on YouTube on mine.
All right, perfect. So we'll start in a few minutes, see who joins us today. And then, of course, this will be on YouTube for people to watch as we get a lot more people watching on YouTube later. Barbara Sue, this is Lynn over there. She just stepped out. This is Larry, and this is Jane.
Hi, Barbara
Hi.
Sue.
Barbara.
Wonderful people from
Barbara Sue.
Barbara Sue.
Barbara Sue.
Do you
Very
hyphenate
southern.
it or is it all in one?
Yeah, she's a Southerner, so
Is it hyphenated or is it all in
No
one?
hyphen. It's just Barbara. But I'm called both because I was named for my grandma Barbara and my grandma Sue.
I think that's great.
just say.
I always say plain Jane, not good.
And so she is, as we'll find out in a second, living in Beersheba, Israel. And we're so thrilled that we have somebody from our community who has made Aliyah. We've got a couple and also another one who made Aliyah. I don't know if you ever met her, Sue, but another one of Bailey Corcoran, who lives there part of the time, lives in the US part of the time. And she made Aliyah, I think, before I met you. But she also married an Israeli, so.
And the Caffeys told me that unfortunately they have another commitment.
Oh, no worries, they'll watch it on YouTube. And hopefully we'll get a couple more
But you
people.
made sure to remind me to tell you.
And if we don't, we'll have fun with just who's here. So again, you never know, it just depends on what's going on. Barbara Sue is a friend of ours, and we're so happy. I get to talk with her fairly frequently on Facebook, which is nice. Makes it so easy these days.
Yeah,
I don't know what we do without the internet. Can you imagine?
especially during this period of time where most
Yeah.
people are staying home a lot.
Yeah, I think that would be so strange to have a pandemic where you don't have access to. Can you imagine also then they may not have had phone access depending on where you lived, and that would have been,
Yeah,
they
they'd
didn't
be
have-
reading books a lot.
wow, that's so strange. They would have Netflix. I don't know what I'd do without Netflix.
You can see my face.
Books.
Books, I have heard of them.
And solitaire card games if you live alone. If you don't
Right.
live alone, you can play more card games with friends. And
Right,
Chess.
newspaper.
Yep.
Chess, yeah, that'd be good too. So, and I think we'll start in 3 minutes. I think chess would be nice. I certainly could be a better chess player. I haven't played in a while. And do you do that? I know chess is big in Israel. Is backgammon as big as it used to be?
I haven't heard anything about backgammon here. I have heard about chess, but I haven't heard about backgammon.
Yeah, backgammon used to be very popular. They call it sheish besh. I'm not sure if it's popular anymore.
It may be. I just may not be talking to the right people.
Right.
No.
Well, chess is always popular everywhere, especially Israel, because one, because it was popular, but two, because you had such a large group of Russian immigrants, and chess is really big in Russia.
Hmm.
Larry, do you play chess? Jane, do you play chess?
No.
I have not played in many, many years, but it's funny that you mentioned chess because I run a little movie group here, and the movie that we're going to be one of the movies, we try and watch movies that are on TCM, and one of the movies is the Thomas Crown Affair. Do you remember that movie with Steve McQueen?
The original one? I
The
haven't
original
seen
one.
the original. I saw the remake,
Oh.
Pierce Brosnan.
Well, the original is really sensational, and there's one scene in it which is so sexy about chess. So when the people in Sun City saw it, matter of fact, Flo Caffey's comment was that all the women now in Sun City
I'm going to take up chess.
but there's one part of the movie where Faye Dunaway, who is extremely attractive in the film, she is playing chess with Steve McQueen in his mansion, and she is caressing the king that she has, and it is very sensual. but it's a wonderful
Okay.
film.
I never think of chess that way, but
No,
you
I
know,
know people don't either, but it's quite.
I think of
seductive.
chess when I think of chess, I think of my grandfather who taught me how to play.
Rabbi, I wanted to mention one other thing to you. We have a friend here that is actually she's president of the Long Beach Island LBI, which is a famous resort area here, the Jewish Center there. And she invited us last week, and we were on the internet with another person from Israel, but this part was a real Israeli. Sorry, Sarah.
you
But,
mean
You know
a
Israeli?
Sabra. I think you mean a Sabra.
not a Sabra, I meant.
I'm not a Sabra. I'm not born
Somebody
here.
born in
I wasn't
Israel.
born here.
But he is another potential person that you might want to interview. I'll get you the info if you're interested.
Great.
He's in an area, he's in a series, there are a series of moshavs, which apparently are right on the Jordanian border, that are agricultural moshavs that are called Arava, Arava. I don't know if you know them, but there are a whole series there. And Jeff
What is he doing there? I just got through saying you're not going to be here.
and he is, I
Jeff
think,
is
like
magic.
the executive director for one of the moshavs, and he talks about Israel agriculture, particularly in the desert there, and the products that they're able.
That would be very interesting.
Research. He was absolutely fascinating. So I asked him afterwards, and he'd be willing to, to basically talk about it. And I think if you were to interview him, so
That's great. Yes, send me the information.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a series of about 8 different moshavs that they have there, and he talks about his exports and some of the problems of even exporting now during the pandemic, during the virus.
Very cool. All right, we'll check that out. Well, we're going to go ahead and start now.
Island.
It's wonderful to have Barbara Sue here. We're interviewing, of course, people who have done really interesting things from our community. She was born in North Carolina, grew up in North Carolina, Virginia, and Georgia, and converted to Judaism in September of 2015 and made Aliyah about 2 years ago. And what's so interesting, not only is she just a terrific person, but it's interesting to see people from America making Aliyah, especially when they're young, because it's not such a common occurrence these days. Obviously, most Jews live in Israel, America. A lot of Jews visit Israel. There's a very small percentage of Americans that actually make Aliyah. So it's really interesting to see someone young. Not only that, she's also living in Beersheba, which is not unheard of, but most people who move to Israel from America live in the Tel Aviv or Jerusalem area, and at the very least, maybe Haifa. And so it's a real pleasure. If you don't know, Barbara Sue moved to Savannah a while back. Her family still lives in Georgia. They live in Baxley, and she lived in Savannah for a while before moving there. So Barbara Sue, welcome.
Thank you.
And what we're going to do is ask questions, and then I'll invite everybody here to ask questions as well. So I'm going to mute everybody except for Barbara Sue. And then when you want to ask a question, just unmute yourself, and then you can ask. So Barbara Sue, I muted you. There you go, perfect. So Barbara Sue, welcome again back to Georgia, even though it's difficult for you because you can't get here right now.
Yeah.
But that'll be one of the things we talk about. So what made you decide to make Aliyah?
Well, there were a number of factors in making Aliyah. I mean, one, yes, it's the Jewish homeland, and that's very good, but also healthcare. Thinking about the future, I want to have a family in the future. I want to have kids, and the ease of having children in Israel versus the United States, it's so much easier. I know the cost of giving birth in the United States can get into the $20,000 range. Whereas if you have a child in Israel, you don't go to the hospital and pay to have a child. You have a child and you don't have to pay for it. I mean, you'll have to pay for it growing up, the things, the supplies and things like that. But healthcare, it's one of the main reasons I made Aliyah. It's so much easier to get here. Also, it's very, very easy to keep kosher here. So much easier than in Georgia.
I imagine so. And I mean, healthcare, of course, they have universal healthcare. Some people like, some people don't, but for a smaller country like Israel, it's really served a good purpose. How does it compare living there then from smaller towns in Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia? I mean, you went from small towns to Beersheba, which is it's not a really small town, but it's not a
No.
giant town either.
It's larger than the towns I grew up in. The public transportation system, I never used public transportation in the United States. I use it all the time here. I don't have a car here in Israel. I did in the States. It was too much trouble. But I use public transportation system. Everything I need, like government offices, banks, everything is right there where I need it, which I'm not used to from small towns where we didn't have everything. It is considered a smaller town in Israel, but it's still one of the bigger ones.
What's the size population wise? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head. I
Couple
looked it up at
100,000
one point.
maybe.
So
I don't know. It's impossible to find any way to look up information like that these days. I don't know where we.
yeah. There's just no way we'd have to go to the Census Bureau or whatever
exactly,
and get
to
the
library. So what is interesting, obviously, is you're living in Beersheba, which a lot of people don't know much about. So why did you choose Beersheba, and what do you like about Beersheba?
well,
And maybe
initially,
explain where it is as well. Explain where it is as well. I think a lot of people
Yeah.
have heard of it, but only biblically.
yeah, Beersheba is in the southern part of Israel. It's in the desert. Originally came here after making Aliyah because the housing prices here are quite cheap compared to the rest of the country, while still having access to all the government offices I would need after making Aliyah to set up bank accounts, to set up healthcare, set up everything like that. So that's why I came to Beersheba, but I actually really like the desert here. Growing up in Georgia, for the most part, it's very humid. It's not humid here. People will complain about humidity, but it'll be like 30%. And since I'm from Georgia, that's nothing. So I actually quite like it. The scenery is quite interesting. The weather cycle is also interesting. It doesn't rain for 5 months out of the year, and it's not like you have to check the weather every day. It doesn't rain usually. And then you'll go through a season where you will have rain every so often. But it's in the southern part of Israel. It's a nice town. The surrounding countryside is quite pretty. You can see camels just, wandering around.
Yeah, I mean, you're literally the only main city in the entire desert of Israel. So,
Yeah.
And I think also you're explaining the difference between the evenings there and here as well when we talked to you.
Yeah. Since we're in the desert, it's a lot cooler at night. In the days, it gets up to dang it, I'm using Celsius now, so I can't remember what the conversion rate is, but it gets up into the high 30s in the Celsius, which is like the hundreds in Fahrenheit, I think. And then in the evenings, it can get down to like the 20s or low 20s Celsius, which is somewhere around 70s in the Fahrenheit. So it's quite nice in the evening.
Which is something, although it's got a bit of nice weather a couple of months, except for the July got really hot, but Georgia's not been too bad as of late. But so what do you see as the main differences between living as an Israeli and living as an American? And I know the positives on both sides and negatives on both sides, but what do you see as the differences?
Well, one of the main differences that I noticed quite early on after moving here is it's much less self-centered in Israel. I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way for talking about America, but where in America, everybody tries to do things individually. Whereas in Israel, it's kind of like we all work together. People will randomly help strangers on the street with random things, like a person's having trouble getting a stroller onto a bus. Some random person will offer to help and they'll let them help. And you trust people. It's much easier to trust. It's a lot safer here. Walking around at night, I'm not scared like I would have been in the US. That's some of the positives. Some of the negatives are they all treat you like family, which means they tell you what to do if they think you're doing something wrong. It's like I'm 31 and a half and I'm not married. So I get a lot of, well, why aren't you married? Don't you want to have kids? Like, yes, I want to have kids. Just give me some time. But yeah, it's both a pro and a con to have everybody you know and people you don't know treat you like family. I remember traveling by myself on the train and having difficulty carrying my suitcase up the steps to get to the next platform when I changed trains because, the elevator was broken. And some random person just helped me get them down the stairs and up the other stairs. Very nice. I don't know his name, but he helped me. It's much easier, like I said earlier, to keep kosher here. Getting food is easier. I can walk practically everywhere I need to go, depending on how long I want to walk. Most things that I need are within a 30-minute walking radius of my apartment currently. That's not something I could do in the US. I drove everywhere. I actually much prefer the walking here. Cars are too much responsibility. I will say Israeli drivers are crazy of cars. You have to be careful when you're walking and crossing streets. I thought drivers in the States were bad, but no, Israeli, it's just crazy. I don't want to drive here specifically because I've seen how people drive. So.
Yeah, I think more people die in car wrecks in Israel each year, something than every war. I mean, it's like a ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it's true. More
really
people,
fast.
I think that's our #1 cause of death in Israel is actually car accidents, traffic accidents.
And it wasn't even close. It used to be it's not even close, but I could maybe drive outside the cities, but if I had to drive in Beersheba or Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, especially Jerusalem was so tiny, those really thin roads were that would be very difficult for me. But
Yeah.
But also want talk about something that I've never experienced, because we were talking about, you have a friend in Tel Aviv, and when I lived in the desert nearby you have to take the bus, which was not too bad. You don't have to anymore because they have
There's a train.
now. Yeah. So how's that?
I love taking the train. It's my favorite way to travel in Israel. There's more room, it's more comfortable, there's a bathroom if you need it. One of the other differences about Israel is there's no bathrooms on buses at all. So if you're taking a long bus trip, you have to wait until either there's a stop for everyone to go to the bathroom, which there usually isn't unless the bus ride's over 2.5 hours long, or you're out of luck. The trains are smoother, quicker, they run regular traffic. It's just all in all a very nice way to travel. I never really traveled by train in the States. I took a train once, but that was it. But people here take the train regularly. A lot of people take the train to work every day. My boyfriend takes the train to work every day and back home. It's the best way to travel here, in my opinion. I just wish they would have the train extend all the way to Eilat because I'd like to visit. But right now it's just like a 3.5-hour bus ride.
Are they going to do that to Eilat at some points?
They've been saying that for like a decade now.
Well, the train's very new. I mean, it wasn't there a few years ago. I mean, they'd started building it, but now that it's running, that's really kind of amazing to have that. I mean, again, Israel's so tiny, so if you get in a train, you can be somewhere pretty quickly, which is nice.
It takes about 1 hour and 10 minutes for me to get from Beersheba to Tel Aviv.
That's pretty amazing. And so does anybody have any questions before my next question? Flossie, go ahead, go off. Thank you, Flossie. This is Flossie. This is Barbara Sue. That's Jeff.
Shalom, y'all.
Okay. Shalom, y'all.
You haven't heard that in a while, I bet. Okay.
Yeah, no, I haven't. I every time I say y'all here, even with my friends who are also Americans who made Aliyah, they're not from the South. Yeah. I'll just get this look and they'll be like, oh yeah, this is when they remember I'm a Southerner.
Well, a few things. We've been to Israel several times, and I agree with you. Beersheba is lovely. We've enjoyed it, and we've gone down to Eilat and driven by and experienced. The 1 or 2 questions I have is, did you come speaking Hebrew, or did you go to an Upan? You went to an Upan then?
Yes, I went to an Upan.
Okay. Also, what type of job do you have, and did you take that into consideration when you made Aliyah?
Okay, I did go to an Ulpan. I went to Ulpan Aleph. I learned pretty much every Hebrew because I didn't grow up going to a Hebrew day school. I didn't know any Hebrew before I came, other than trying to learn like in the month before. But I did Ulpan Aleph, but I haven't done any more. But I've learned a lot on the street pretty much from friends and family, because It's very different from what you learn in the classroom.
I was
We'll
going to
use
say,
slang.
yes,
Yeah. And yeah, I use it not so much right now because I'm at home a lot. Usually before the pandemic and everybody was staying home more, I would use it every day going to the store or the market or just to people on the street or the bus. Job-wise, I didn't really take into consideration jobs when I moved, which was probably not wise at the time. My current job, technically, I'm on unpaid leave at the moment because of the pandemic, is an English teacher for Burlington English.
okay.
I am going into my 6th month of unpaid unemployment.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I just got that email Sunday. I'm not happy about it. And trying to find another job during this time is very difficult.
Not easy.
Yeah.
Yes.
We know from our friends who also made Aliyah, I guess it's over 40 years ago for them. So they're up in the north. And I'll second what you have to say about the trains. We always roll into Israel at the airport. We just roll our baggage right onto the train. And before we know it,
We're in
we're in
Kiryat
Kiryat Motzkin, which is in the cryo north of Haifa. But it's a wonderful way to travel, very relaxing, and they even have internet connections aboard, so it makes it easy.
It's a brand new train too, yeah. And Larry, please.
He's muted.
There you go, he's off now. Larry, you're still muted, Larry. Larry, you're
I
muted.
have about a million questions, but the
Okay.
couple that pop into my mind, tell us a little about the process of going Aliyah. What is it? Is there a commitment? I understand conceptually what the word means, but how long do you prepare? Do you have to do things through the Israeli embassy and the United States embassy? Are you a dual citizen? And are there economic incentives to coming there? I know it used to be you could bring a refrigerator in at no cost, or, there were other kinds of things like that, or Nescafe coffee was a big thing always in Israel,
It's still a big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, making Aliyah, the preparations took over a year for me. You have to get all your documents apostilled, and that takes a while. And then you have to do Aliyah interviews with whichever Israeli embassy is closer. The one for me was in Miami. That was close, but not really. And yes, I am a dual citizen. I'm a citizen of both the United States and of Israel now. There are economic incentives to both moving to Israel and to specifically moving to the south or the northern part of the country. So when you make Aliyah, the government gives you I can't remember, it's a kind of like a benefit basket where they give you a certain amount of money to help you out for like the first year or so. And then after that, you get a certain amount of money each month that decreases over the next 5 years until it disappears. You get like discounts on mortgages for houses for the first 10 years you live in Israel. Let's see, what are some other incentives? I know specifically for going south, you also got extra money for moving into the southern part of the country. So Beersheba was another incentive to come here. The process does take a while in the United States, but it does depend on all the documents you have to get certified. And it can take, depending on how long you use government offices in the United States, which any government, no matter whether it's the United States or Israel, takes forever to do anything. It was actually more difficult dealing with Israel because Israel is still using faxes. So, and finding places to fax things was not that easy in Savannah, Georgia, because most people had switched over to just using emails. But they didn't want us to have it photocopied and emailed or scanned into the computer and emailed. They wanted it faxed. So that took some doing and was interesting. I hadn't used a fax in a very long time. My dad used to have one in his office. He was a doctor. But the documents themselves, once you got them all apostilled and they're all in order, and once you get approved for Aliyah, then you can move fairly soon after you get approved. You can pick which flight you'd like to take. There are big ones in the summer, but I didn't feel like going in a big group, so I came earlier than that in April of 2017, I believe. So I've been here 3.5 years. Let's see. But yeah, so the process does take a while. Once you get here, after you land in the airport, they take you and anybody else who's also on the plane making Aliyah. There were a couple other people on the same plane I was. They take you to the office and you start getting all your ID cards, your Ole documents, all the documents that you need to be an Israeli, your certificate to open a bank account, your certificate to get health care. All those things are given to you in the airport. And then you get a free taxi ride to wherever you're going to live. So
Is there an age limit?
not on Aliyah that I know of.
I don't think there's an age limit, but there is requirements for serving in the military depending on your
Yeah.
age. It's not as bad as it used to be. They were desperate for people to serve. They're not anymore because
Yeah.
not because of the Russian lean. So were you too old you were too old to be conscripted?
I was too old. I was too old to be conscripted into the military. I believe the cutoff age for women is 25. If you're over 25, when you make Aliyah, you don't have to serve in the military. Men, the age is a little higher. It's like 27, I think.
Just missed it, Larry.
Could you tell us a little bit about religious experiences in Israel compared to in Georgia? Were you a member of Big Israel when
Yeah.
you were here? You
Yes.
were. Yeah. So you're familiar with the Reform congregations and
Yeah.
what is going to services like, or do you go to I mean, the virus
do
is
you go to
obviously
services?
different. Yeah.
Right now, no, I'm not going to services because of the virus. I will say I was quite shocked when I came to Beersheba, and there's a synagogue on pretty much every corner. There are so many places to choose from. They can be tiny little holes in the walls. They can be big synagogues. Services are all in Hebrew, pretty much everywhere. The whole thing, not just, parts of it. It's all in Hebrew, although there are occasional ones where you can find some with Russian. I believe we do have one Reform congregation in Beersheba, but I've never actually been to that synagogue because it's all the way in remote, which is really far away from where I live. And on Saturdays, of course, buses don't run, and I don't like to take the bus. So, but going to high holiday services, I get a little lost because of all the Hebrew. My Hebrew is still not the best, but everyone's very, very welcoming, willing to help, willing to, be there for you. Almost every synagogue is Orthodox, for lack of a better term. Women are separated. Pretty much all synagogues. I think there's like 2 or 3 synagogues in the entire city that let men and women sit together. But it's like people who aren't even religious, when they go to synagogue on like the high holy days or other holidays, they go to an Orthodox synagogue. It's very different from Savannah, Georgia, where we had the 3 different Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. Pretty much everywhere is Orthodox. But it's not, everyone's welcoming. They feel they're nice. It's just, for me, I get lost a lot with the Hebrew.
You had mentioned a lot about keeping kosher. I think you mentioned that a couple of times. That seemed to be a major consideration. Did you keep kosher in Savannah, and you're keeping
Yes.
kosher now as well? So even
Yes.
though you were a member of a Reform congregation, you kept kosher in Savannah, and you're still doing that in Israel.
Yeah.
Is that common? I mean, do you find many Israelis? We
Most-
try to
it's
think of Israel as a
actually-
secular country more than.
Yeah, well, most Israelis, unless they out and out eat treif, keep kosher even if they don't keep kosher on purpose, because it's very difficult, unless you live in Tel Aviv, to get a lot of non-kosher foods. I was keeping kosher in the US. I am a pescatarian, which means I eat fish, but I don't eat other meats. So it's very easy for me to keep, it was easier for me to keep kosher in the States, and it's very easy to keep kosher here. But yeah, I like keeping kosher. So
Let me get one from Jeff also. Jeff, did you have a question?
Well, I'm glad to see at least, yeah, that was one of the problems with the progressive movement in Israel. The times we were there, it was very difficult for them to start a progressive temple. Not that there wasn't interest in the members, but there was an awful lot of resistance with the Orthodox community. They would always put up a lot of barriers on permits and building and this and that. It's interesting you mentioned there was one progressive in Beersheba, but it's way out of town. So that, in one way, that doesn't surprise me.
You have
Yeah.
any questions?
Lynn.
Is there,
Oh,
have you-
Jeff, and then Lynn.
or you've never been to it, right?
No, I haven't. Like I said, it's very difficult to get to if you don't live in the neighborhood. It's one of the newer neighborhoods on the outskirts of the city.
Because there you'd probably find a lot of English speakers, native English speakers.
Let's go. We'll go
I'm
Lynn.
jumping in.
Oh, yeah, you can go Flossie, and then we'll go Lynn afterwards.
Okay. First of all, I want to commend you on your decision to make Aliyah. I take it you came by yourself, not with family or friends. Am I correct?
I made Aliyah with my ex-husband.
Oh, okay. All righty. Okay. Well, still, accolades we're doing.
But yeah, no family in Israel. So
All right. Okay. You had said you're 31 and you've been there 3 years.
mhm.
Did you decide earlier, like in your earlier 20s to do this and it just took you a while to move along and do it? Or was it what you said you did research with financially and just that was the impetus?
I converted to Judaism in 2015. So before that, it wasn't really a thought. Afterwards, I found out about Israel and that it does have good health care and it's a good place to raise a family. It's also a lot safer to live here, even with the rocket attacks randomly from Gaza. So it was about thinking for about a year or so before I decided to start the process, and then another year or so before all the documents got done.
I hear you. Well, good luck. We're proud of you.
Thank
For
you.
your time.
And
Thank
Lynn,
you.
did you have a question?
My first question was going to be very personal because you mentioned a boyfriend, but we'll skip over that.
No, you can ask.
I wanted to ask how your family in the United States feels about you living so far away.
My family, they miss me. My mom specifically, she's like, she supports me in what I do, but she really does miss me a lot. They're supportive in general. My mom is worried, but then again, she's Christian. So yeah, what can I do about that? It's hard living this far away from them, and especially now because I can't actually fly and visit them. And come December, it'll have been 2 years since I've seen them in person. I was hoping to go back this summer, but the pandemic got in the way. So yeah, with that. But my sister, my family, most of them are very supportive.
Good.
And what I like here, you talk about keep kosher, and I've never lived in, I lived in Jerusalem and Arad, so it's having the restaurants and the bakeries, they're everywhere you go, and you just have the parv line, you have the milk one, you have the meat one, you just go in, you get baked goods every morning, you're walking it off so it's a great way to stay in shape.
Yeah.
And how many has everybody been to Israel who's on here? Has anybody not been to Beersheba? Okay, so everybody has been to Beersheba. So, oh, you haven't? Okay, I live
Lynn.
nearby and I haven't been there very often.
Lynn, was your question, is my boyfriend Israeli? He made Aliyah from the United Kingdom. That's where my boyfriend's from.
So there's a cool accent. Larry.
What is your apartment like? Are you in a complex of buildings? Is it like apartment style garden apartments? And how big is it? And, we hear about these tiny Israeli apartments. Mostly we hear about, the enormous expenses of living in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. I don't know how cheap it is. And I thought that was one of the reasons that they were encouraging settlements for people to move out of the area into the so-called occupied territories, because it was such much cheaper living. And I guess Beersheba, you said, is cheaper than living in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem as well. But and also, could you tell us what is the road behind us there? It looks like
What is oh,
I'm
I'm
fascinated by.
the road behind us is from the musical I was in, The Sound of Music. I was a nun. I'm with I'm with the light opera group of the Negev, which produces musicals in English.
Wow.
So, and I've been doing this is my third year. Our shows got cut off mid-season because of the pandemic. We're hoping to finish off in March of the coming year.
Did you do it in Hebrew or in English?
English.
In English.
Let's see. The apartments in Israel are smaller. There is a large size difference between the United States and Israel. The current apartment I'm in is in what used to be a house. It's been divided into 3 separate apartments. It's small, but it's got what I need. I have a bathroom, a small kitchen. This is my living room. The fridge didn't fit in the kitchen, so it's in here. I have a little bedroom. I live in the old city, and there's a little patio I share with my neighbor where we have a washing machine to wash clothes and lines to dry clothes. Most people don't have dryers here in Beersheba. You don't really need them except maybe in the winter. So I have lived before in apartment buildings. If the building is less than 4 stories tall, it's unlikely to have an elevator. So before I moved here, where I'm on the ground floor, I lived in apartments that were 3 flights up, no elevator. So that's how I got my exercise in then.
and as for living there, but what is your view? We see the news, and we see all this stuff going on, of course, with the politics, with the West Bank, of course, the big announcement this week, last week, of the UAE. What is the feeling in Israel with all this stuff going on?
Stuff like that, it's usually we'll believe it when it happens. Regarding peace with various peoples and countries, we'll believe it when it happens. Regarding politics and things like that, I don't think anybody here is happy with the current prime minister at the moment. I know a lot of people have been out protesting the government in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv. I haven't noticed any here. If there's any protest here, they're usually up at the university, which is fairly far from where I am. There's always people unhappy with how the government's dealing with the pandemic at the moment. There are people you can't satisfy.
Right.
You're too strict. You're not strict enough. So I'm also kind of isolated in that I'm staying home a lot. So I'm not getting as much news about the government and the pandemic, because I used to look at it every day, but my stress levels were going really up. So I stopped looking at it every day.
Well, we know it can be stressful, but it sounds like it's stressful not because of, we see on TV, it makes it seem so dangerous, but the stress is more the pandemic, being alone, it's waiting for your job. But again, what's very interesting is that you got 6 months and counting of unemployment, which of course is extended, but in America it's been extended, but it's nowhere near what you're getting. So it's
well, 6 months is the normal unemployment period you have, but because of the pandemic, they're going to extend it further than 6 months. And as for like rockets and stuff from Gaza, since I've been here, we've only really had, I believe, 2 instances of where there actually were sirens sounding in Beersheba for rockets and whatnot like that. And yeah, it's a bit of a scary experience. But for the most part, after it's over, you just go back to everything you were doing. It's the communities that are on the border, like Sderot, Netivot, Ashkelon, where I have friends who live there that I'm much more worried about. I mean, I have an app on my phone, as most Israelis who live in this part of the country do, that lets you know every time a rocket is fired from Gaza and which way it's headed. And recently there's been like 1 or 2 in the past 2 or 3 weeks, but they were both at like Sederot. So it's sad, but it's the world we live in right now. We have the apps that tell us. So.
Yeah, it's really. And how far are you from the Dead Sea in Masada?
Depends on which side of Masada you want to go to. If you want to go to the Roman road, it's more along the lines of an hour. If you want to go on the snake path and use the what are they called?
Cable
Transports
car.
that go up.
Cable car.
That's an hour 45-ish, but that's also to the Dead Sea. Dead Sea is about an hour 15 to an hour 45, depending on which city you're going to stay at. I just took a trip to the Dead Sea last week. Went to Ein Bokek with my boyfriend for a couple of days. It was his birthday. It was actually quite nice. It wasn't nearly as crowded as this time of year usually is. But it's very nice to be able to go to the Dead Sea, and it's only like an hour and a half away. Although the road.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Keep going, Barbara Sue. Sorry.
The road to the Dead Sea, once you pass the road to the Dead Sea is like this. So if you have motion sickness, take a lot of medicine. That's what I do.
I thought it was fun driving that road.
It is not fun riding when you have motion sickness.
Larry, you had a question.
Barbara, did you do a mud bath? When you were
I did get the mud treatment, but I got the ones where you buy the mud and you put it on yourselves and then wash it
Yeah.
off in the Dead Sea.
Okay. Yes, okay.
I was going to ask about Israeli TV programs. They seem to have taken America by storm. Fauda, Shtisel, Shirugim. Are they as popular in Israel as they are in the United States now? Or could you suggest even some others that you think are we should be watching? Because maybe when you were there in the US a couple of years ago, they weren't really that well known.
Well, as far as Israeli TV is, I don't really watch TV all that much. I just watch Netflix. So I don't really know what Israeli TV shows are popular to watch. I just have my computer and I don't really want to pay for cable. I don't have a TV. So I watch Netflix when I watch TV shows or movies.
What a coincidence. That's what I do.
Although I will say Israeli Netflix is better than the United States. We have a lot more of the videos on Netflix here than you do in the States, where it's split between Netflix, Hulu, and some other ones.
HBO Max and
Yeah.
Amazon, yeah. So there's a lot of benefits to living there. There's also a lot of difficulties. Obviously, if you don't have Target or Walmart, right? And you have to, what do you do for shopping and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, there's not really big stores like Walmart or Target that have like everything in them. If you need medicine, you have to go to a pharmacy. You can't just go to the supermarket. If you want food, you go to the supermarket or you go to the shuk, where you can get fresh fruits and vegetables and fresh meat and stuff like that. If you want bread, you can get breads at the supermarkets usually, but it's better to get your bread from a bakery. It tastes better. It's better tasting there. So for shopping for what you need, you have to go to different individual stores. Like you go to a home improvement store. We have Ace Hardware here, by the way, which I found funny.
Yay.
So yeah, a couple of American stores. We have Ace Hardware. We have American Eagle for clothes. There's some other. I mean, we have McDonald's, of course. I don't eat there. It's way too expensive. It's a tourist trap.
And she's not being sarcastic. In Israel and other places outside of America, as we've talked about, McDonald's is a much nicer place.
It's not really nicer. They just charge more.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the two main American stores that I can think of off the top of my head. But I thought it was funny that Ace Hardware was one of them. But if you want clothes, you go to a clothes store. You can go to a mall and you can generally get what you need, but you have to go to the individual stores. So it's fun, but it does make it take longer to do your errands.
Larry?
Is there much of an Arab population in Beersheba, or how are the Arab settlements Are there any
Sure.
Arab, I know they're Arab citizens, or not even citizens, but at least they're Arab residents, I guess you would call it. Are they in separate areas? Or is it, I hate to use the word, but segregated into different groups? And are you
It's not,
intermixed?
yeah, it's not segregated. I mean, we have a very large Arab community near Beersheba called Rahat. I believe it's one of the largest ones in Israel. Arabs are citizens here for the most part. Most of them are citizens. You walk down the street, you're going to see people who are Arab, Russian, Israeli, Hispanic, American. You'll see a lot of different people, and everybody's nice to each other. They're courteous and things like that. They help each other. It's very peaceful compared to what I was led to believe when I lived in the United States. You go to near the university campus, you'll see students from everywhere. There'll be women walking around in hijabs or even burqas learning. And there'll be, guys from Russia, Ukraine, Europe, the United States, South Africa, Ghana, Ethiopia. There'll be people from all walks of life, and we all live pretty much peacefully here in Beersheba.
I was kind of led to believe that there are two kinds of people that live in Israel. You're either a resident or a citizen. If you wanted to be a citizen and actually vote in elections and things like that, then you had to declare, loyalty to Israel. Residents could live there, but did not declare loyalty. And I thought that there was, maybe this is propaganda, a large part of the Arab population was not voting because they did not declare loyalty, so they were not citizens. But you're saying that
most of the Arab population that lives here are citizens. There
Okay.
are some that don't vote because they don't believe in voting for the Israeli government system, but they're not prevented from voting. There's actually the Arab Party in the government that most of the Arabs vote for. Teaching English, a lot of my students have been Arab. A lot of them want to learn English, and they're very nice and kind, and they're citizens here. We're all pretty much citizens here. There are people that live in Gaza and in the West Bank that will come in that are not citizens, but they work in Israel and they go back to the West Bank or Gaza. Although right now I believe Gaza is still closed because of the pandemic.
Bossy.
Barbara, were you a teacher in the United States before you made Aliyah, or this is your first teaching experience?
No, this is my first teaching experience here in Israel. In the United States, I got a degree in theater, and then I worked as a tour guide in Savannah.
Oh.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, Larry and his wife, my husband Jeff and I, we love opera. So when you said light opera, we would be there in the audience cheering you on. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and before we
Thank you.
finish, I want to make sure you tell us what have you, I mean, obviously, especially before the pandemic, what did you do for fun as a young person in Israel?
The first thing I found was the light opera group of the Negev, which the auditions are usually end of August, beginning of September for whatever show we're going to do this year. And then we'll have rehearsals starting after the High Holy Days until mid-February, where we'll start performing the show through the end of March. So it takes up a lot of time. It was a lot of fun. There are bars people can go to. I've just never been a bar person to go to for fun. I much more enjoy hanging out with friends, and I've made a fair amount of friends since I've moved here. Initially, it was difficult, but once I joined the light opera group of the Negev, which has a lot of Olim or children of Olim in it, it was much easier to find friends and get connections from there. So for fun, that's what I do mostly. I can also go for a walk around and just have fun. By the way, if you like cats, this is the place for you. They're everywhere.
I think, did they bring him in for a rat problem and they just went crazy and they're everywhere?
Yeah, the British brought it in back during the British Mandate, I believe, because there were so many rats. Problem is there's not a really natural enemy for the cats. So it became, instead of a rat problem, a cat problem. And as a person who loves cats and had cats in the States, and I'm currently taking care of a cat right now, it was very weird for me to come here because a lot of Israelis see cats as pets, like they were rats or mice or gophers in your lawn or something. And to me, that's weird because I love cats. But a lot of Israelis do not like cats. They're much more of a dog people.
Right,
Dog,
yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And what I always found interesting about the cats is they sounded so different than the cats over here. I was wondering if I took a cat over there, would the cat be able to speak with anybody? Almost like they'd have to go to, take Hebrew for cat courses. So I want to thank Barbara Sue again. As you can see, she is a terrific person. She moved there, and obviously shortly afterwards, the world changed quite a bit. So being in Beersheba during a pandemic alone is a difficult time. And but she's so positive and is such a great person and made lots of friends.
I will say I am glad that I'm here during the pandemic. Just gonna say that. With the healthcare here that,
Oh, you mean
the
in Israel?
coronavirus test does not cost money here. If you or your doctor feel like you have corona, you go and you get tested. End of story. You don't have to pay anything for it. And the healthcare, the medicines, everything's cheaper here in the States. So I'm just glad I'm here during the pandemic.
One of the there's always benefits to different places. And I think you've given us a lot of information on some of the benefits. So we'll finish with Flossie, one last question.
Just what Barbara is saying, I tend to feel when they find a vaccine, it's going to be coming from Israel, truthfully, the research they're doing there.
Yeah.
Jeff's saying we'll see, but I tend to think it's going to be.
I know they're working on a vaccine because it's been in our
I've
news.
been reading that, yes. Well, good luck to you, Barbara.
And I think,
Thank
Flossie,
you.
that's a good way to end with a prayer. We pray that the vaccine will come from an Israeli company, preferably a company I've invested a lot of money in. Prayer.
Amen, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Barbara Sue. Again, all the best. I'll talk to you later, but thank you for coming on. And as you can see, she's a delight and just a sweetheart. My wife and I were hoping to see her last summer, but we obviously couldn't do it. So hopefully next summer when we go, we'll get to see her and I'll go to some of those bakeries. So again, all our best. Stay tuned. Next week, we will not have a class. I had a meeting for an organization I'm on the board of, and they said at this time, and I really need to be at that meeting, so I apologize. So we'll start again in September. We will be having the Wednesday class next week, but just not the Tuesday class. So
Thank you.
everyone stay safe, or as we say in Israel, litrot, or as they say, that's how they say it in Beersheba. In Tel Aviv, they say adios.
Thank you all for having me.
Stay
Thank
safe.
you.
Be safe, everybody.
Be safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.